What happens when live TV turns into a powder keg and the fuse is lit by Whoopi Goldberg herself? The lights blaze, the cameras roll, and the studio hums with that fake, nervous laughter that always fills the air right before something goes terribly wrong. It's daytime television glossy, harmless, perfectly packaged until Whoopi leans forward, eyes steady, voice calm but carrying a dangerous edge. Not if you're black. The words hit like a slap across the face of America. For a moment, nobody moves. The silence isn't calm. It's shock so sharp it cuts the air. A couple of hosts freeze mid-smile. Someone in the audience lets out a nervous giggle before realizing no one else is laughing. Even the sound engineer hesitates, finger hovering over the applause button like he's defusing a bomb. Greg Gutfeld blinks, his expression quietly screaming, "Did she really just go there?" The camera drifts in slow motion as the audience stirs, their faces split between disbelief and morbid curiosity. This isn't The View anymore. This is a collision between ideology, ego, and live broadcast. Whoopi keeps going, her tone righteous and daring, as though she's challenging anyone to interrupt. But the more she talks, the thinner the bridge becomes between her outrage and the point she's trying to make. Her co-hosts exchange tight glances, the silent code for someone stop her before this goes viral. But it's too late. The moment is already writing itself into the internet's bloodstream. Viewers at home stop scrolling. Phones buzz. Hashtags burst to life. A producer whispers into the headset, "We can't cut this. We're live." Tension thickens in the room, visible even through the screen. Whoopi leans back, confident, unaware that her words have just summoned a reckoning. A few feet away sits Tyrus, massive, composed eyes narrowing just slightly. Not laughing, not shocked, waiting, and when it becomes his turn to speak, the temperature in the studio will rise 10 degrees. In seconds, a friendly talk show discussion has transformed into a national flashpoint. The heat in the room tightens, biting down like a spotlight with teeth. Nervous laughter skims across the surface because everyone knows a skit is coming, but nobody can hit the brakes. Whoopi leans in as if she owns the table, voice calm enough to pass for casual authority. "Not if you're black," she repeats, the words echoing across the studio. A few heads snap. A smile stalls. Someone in the third row gasps. The audience waits for a save that never comes. No music cue. No joke. Just a piano wire silence stretched between cameras and couches. Then the scramble begins. Crosstalk erupts. A co-host tries to steady the moment, insisting the world is different now than in places like Iran. The daytime TV moderation tone tries to clear the wreckage, but Whoopi doesn't budge. She loads another sentence. More fuel for an already overheated mic. If they're going to talk about Iran, she insists, they need to remember America's own sins. People tied to cars. Black people hanged. The same thing, she argues. That's when the room forgets how to breathe. The applause that follows isn't applause at all, just a reflex triggered by a blinking red light. A few claps fall like dropped silverware, then die instantly. The studio's heartbeat seems to pound from the rafters. Someone coughs into their hand. A co-host nods by reflex and instantly regrets it. Greg mutters under his breath. The control room panics behind the glass. Whoopi doubles down, cold and immovable, stacking her argument like a moral fortress. She gestures sharply, "Don't interrupt when I'm making a point," hoping the moment will feel historic. It does, but not the way she expects. Another co-host jumps in, voice shaking as she tries to soften the blow, insisting that murder for differences is wrong anywhere. Another voice tries to bring up facts versus feelings. The table dissolves into verbal traffic. Everyone thinks they have the green light, and no one moves. Whoopi keeps pushing, listing American sins with the certainty of a closing argument. Then she says the line that locks the entire room in place. The line that throws everyone straight into the windshield. "If we start talking about Iran, we've got to remember we've been hanging black people in this country." And the room freezes. Asterisk. The studio hangs in a strange, suspended tension, like a glass of water on a dashboard right before it tips. The lights feel hotter, the air heavier, and the audience doesn't know whether to clap, gasp, or just pray the camera doesn't land on them. A woman in the second row presses her lips together until the color drains out. A man near the aisle shakes his head slowly, as if trying to dislodge a stubborn thought. On the couch, panic hides under practiced poise, one host offering the two-eyed network-approved smile, another pretending a note card might somehow save them. Greg shifts like he's ready to throw a rope, then hesitates, then decides the rope needs a hook. He glances toward the crowd and catches a look, begging him to say something, but the moment resists him. It belongs entirely to Whoopi and the silence she's carved out of the broadcast. Asterisk. The camera drifts over the crowd with a predatory slowness, turning every face into a potential reaction meme. Murmurs ripple through the rows like wind brushing wheat. A nervous laugh bursts and dies. The applause light blinks again and receives a few hesitant claps that fizzle on impact. In the control room, producers whisper through thinning headsets to let the moment breathe. There's no walking it back now. The director rides the switcher in a frantic search for a safe angle that doesn't exist. Whoopi sits steady and righteous, convinced she's planted a moral flag, unaware that every sentence behind it is starting to slide. A co-host tries to rebuild the bridge with careful talk about context and lived reality, but it's like propping a collapsing beam with toothpicks. The room aches for a referee for clarity, for balance, for anything that isn't outrage or laughter, but it gets neither. It gets to pause. The big one, the kind that turns a segment into a headline and a live moment into something uneditable. And in that bright, trembling quiet sits the shadow at the end of the table. Broad shoulders, hands folded, eyes steady. Tyrus waits without reaching for the mic, the moment rolling toward him like a slow train. Whoopi breathes out, satisfied, and the audience exhales with her, unsure if they're relieved or bracing for impact. The table resets itself. The show tries to remember its format, and the music cue begs to be played. It's a slow-motion train wreck. Precise, awful, inevitable. The next voice will decide whether this becomes smoke or thunder. Asterisk, a faint rise in temperature moves through the room. Greg doesn't rush in. He lets the silence stretch like a held breath before a punchline. His mouth twitches, but his eyes stay sharp, scanning the wreckage. Then, with calm precision, he leans toward the mic and says, "Girls, girls, girls." His voice slides across the room like a smirk turned into sound. Nervous chuckles bubble up, grateful for something solid to grab. He straightens, blinking as if hit with déjà vu. "Whoopi," he says, "even the fake Republican next to you couldn't back that mess up." The audience breaks. Laughter spills out, not quite free, but desperate for release. The tension escapes like steam through a crack. Asterisk, he keeps going. "I haven't seen Whoopi wave her fingers like that since someone offered her a salad." The grin in his voice detonates half a beat after the absurdity sinks in. The laughter is real now, but not gentle. It bruises. Whoopi shifts, eyes narrowing, jaw tight, still clinging to her moral posture as it buckles under Greg's precision sarcasm. "You know you're on the wrong side of history," he adds, when even the audience doesn't know whether to clap or call security. The camera sweeps over awkward smiles, over eager claps, and people staring into their laps as if eye contact might implicate them. Asterisk. Greg glances toward the control room and whispers, "Is the applause sign broken? Or are we all just stunned into silence?" More laughter erupts, some clapping, some booing, all of it chaotic. He turns back to Whoopi, studying her expression. "That face right there," he says, pointing lightly. "That's the face of someone realizing the applause was for the wrong reason." A co-host tries to step in, maybe to rescue the tone or restore civility, but the moment is already too far gone. Greg slices into the chaos like static cutting through a weak signal. He raises one finger and snaps the room back to him. "Hold up, we need to unpack this," he says, leaning forward. "You're telling me that living as a black millionaire, in America, on national television, is somehow equivalent to being a woman under a regime that literally stones people in the streets?" He lets out a dry, disbelieving laugh. "Whoopi, come on. That's not a comparison. That's a cry for better writers." The studio explodes. A roar of laughter that's equal parts admiration and disbelief. The audience lives for a verbal duel, and Greg delivers it like a seasoned fighter. Sharp, rhythmic, perfectly timed. "You know what this feels like?" he continues, settling back in his seat. "It's like watching someone argue with a ghost. Nobody said Iran was perfect, Whoopi, but last I checked, nobody here is getting tossed off buildings for what they believe, unless you count Twitter." Asterisk, the crowd howls. Even behind the cameras, operators shake from trying not to laugh. The absurdity of the comparison is too big to ignore, and Greg rides the wave with deadly grace. Then he lowers his voice, just enough to turn the moment. "Here's the thing," he says quietly. "You're not fighting for justice anymore. You're fighting to sound right." The line hits harder than any punchline. The laughter falters into a thin, uneasy silence. Whoopi shifts, caught between defiance and discomfort. Greg doesn't gloat. He doesn't need to. The truth is doing the heavy lifting. Asterisk, Alyssa leans forward, trying to lighten the air with a shaky laugh. She was like, "We in this country tie people to cars. Speak for yourself, girl." The crowd cracks up again, this time looser, grateful for the release. Greg pounces on the moment, playful and lethal. "Yeah, speak for yourself," he echoes. "The rest of us just drive them to brunch." Laughter erupts again, waves rolling through the room. When it settles, Greg lets a final jab fly. "Look," he says, half serious, half teasing. "You can't just pull history off the shelf every time your argument runs out of gas. That's not activism. That's improv." Another burst of laughter. Live TV adrenaline hums in the air. He taps the desk, smirking. "Next time, Whoopi, maybe skip the comparison. Stick to the salad." Asterisk, the camera catches her expression, a tight, polite smile that never reaches her eyes. The audience cheers. Anyway, some because they agree, others because they can't believe what they're witnessing. The room feels lighter now, but beneath the laughter lies a quiet sting. Greg's jokes cut because they're true. He's turned outrage into entertainment, discomfort into applause. But as the laughter fades, a flicker of unease hangs in the air. It's in the way Whoopi's gaze drops. In the way Greg exhales, knowing the clash isn't over. Her words didn't just miss the mark, they painted a target. Asterisk, and at the end of the table, Tyrus is already lining up the shot. The camera finds him with a slow, deliberate drift. He sits massive, still, unreadable, a mountain you don't move around, you confront. The energy shifts immediately, humming low and rising. Greg's last punchline dies in the air, like a ringtone that someone finally answered. Tyrus lifts the mic just slightly, a gesture that alone freezes the studio. No dramatic flourish, no setup, just that cool, unhurried voice. Asterisk, first off, he says, deadpan, for all the people I've tied to cars, I never asked about their sexuality. The line hits with a stunned, wicked thud. Laughter ripples through the studio, breaking the tension just enough to let people breathe again. He tilts his head, eyes glinting. Very progressive of me. Happy Pride Month. The crowd roars, grateful for a moment that doesn't feel like walking a tightrope over fire. Asterisk, then the shift comes. Subtle, heavy. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He lets it drop, solid and weighted. Listen, he says, hands still on the desk, shoulders set like a fortress. You live in a country where you can say dumb things on TV and still have a job tomorrow. That's not oppression. That's opportunity. The room recalibrates instantly. The laughter dies. The lights feel a little brighter. And for the first time all night, the audience isn't reacting. They're absorbing. Asterisk.